Professor Veltara stood at the front of her classroom at the Galactic Academy, her 3 eye stalks scanning the diverse group of students before her. For 200 years, she had taught comparative species psychology to the galaxy's brightest minds. She was a Zinthari, a species known across the stars for their calm wisdom and peaceful ways. Her people spent their free time in quiet meditation, synchronized breathing exercises, and contemplative silence. To the Zinthari, this was the height of civilization. Today marked a special occasion. For the first time in the Academy's 1,000-year history, humans sat among her students. The humans had only joined the Galactic Council 3 years ago. They were newcomers, barely out of their own solar system, yet somehow they had impressed the Council enough to earn seats at the most prestigious educational institution in known space. Veltara had read the reports about Earth with great interest. A small blue planet, relatively young, with a species that had developed space travel remarkably quickly. She observed the human students now. There were 5 of them scattered among the 30 other pupils. They looked fragile compared to the armored Vrelians or the massive Kotheen. Their bodies seemed soft, unprotected, yet they sat with curious expressions, eyes bright and alert, constantly looking around the room as if everything fascinated them. One human in particular caught her attention. His identification badge read, Marcus Chen, Earth. He was lean, with dark hair and an eager smile that seemed permanently fixed on his face. He had already introduced himself to every other student in the class, something most species found exhausting on the first day. Welcome, students, Veltara began, her voice carrying the gentle tones her species was known for. This semester, we will explore how different civilizations approach rest, recreation, and leisure. Understanding how species relax tells us much about their values, their fears, and their view of life itself. The students settled into attentive silence. Well, most of them. Veltara noticed the humans seemed to vibrate with barely contained energy, even when sitting still. Your first assignment, she continued, is simple but important. I want each species represented here to record and present examples of how your people engage in leisure activities. Show us what you do for enjoyment when work is done and survival needs are met. A Vrelian student, her silver scales gleaming, raised a graceful hand. Professor, should we show traditional activities or modern ones? Either is acceptable, Veltara replied. The goal is to help us understand what brings your people joy and relaxation. Marcus Chen's hand shot up immediately, moving so fast that Veltara's eye stalks jerked back slightly in surprise. Yes. Marcus? Professor, can we submit a compilation video instead of just one activity? His voice carried an enthusiasm that seemed almost excessive to Veltara's sensibilities. Humans have a pretty wide variety of recreational activities, and we thought it might be more interesting to show several. Veltara considered this. It seemed reasonable. In fact, it suggested the humans had limited options and wanted to showcase their variety to avoid appearing primitive. She felt a small surge of satisfaction. This would be an excellent teaching moment about how young civilizations compensate for their lack of sophisticated leisure activities. That is acceptable, she agreed. A compilation showing the range of human recreation will be educational for everyone. Marcus grinned and exchanged glances with the other human students. They seemed to share some private amusement. One of them, a young woman named Keiko Martinez, actually had to cover her mouth as if suppressing laughter. Veltara noticed several non-human students watching the humans with what appeared to be knowing expressions. A Kotheen student named Brel caught her eye and made a gesture in his species' sign language that roughly translated to, "This will be interesting." There was something in his manner that suggested he knew something she didn't. How odd, Veltara thought. The Kotheen had only made contact with humans 8 months ago. What could they possibly know about human recreation that would cause such a reaction? She dismissed the thought. Young beings often had their private jokes. Over the next 2 weeks, the students worked on their projects. Veltara checked on their progress periodically. The Vrelians were recording their traditional harmony singing ceremonies. The Morpheans were documenting their gentle artistic phase-shifting displays. The Kotheen were showing their methodical puzzle-solving meditation sessions. Everything was proceeding exactly as expected. When she asked Marcus about the human presentation, he assured her it was coming along well. "We're just making sure we get good footage of everything," he said, that constant smile still in place. "We want to really capture the full human experience." "I appreciate your thoroughness," Veltara replied warmly. "I look forward to learning about Earth's peaceful pastimes." Marcus's smile somehow grew even wider. "Oh, you're definitely going to learn something, Professor." The day before presentations were due, Veltara encountered Keiko in the hallway. The human student was reviewing footage on her datapad, and Veltara caught a glimpse of the screen. She saw what appeared to be humans in some kind of open field, running and jumping. Traditional games?" Veltara asked pleasantly. Keiko looked up, startled, then quickly closed the file. Yeah, something like that. Very traditional. Wonderful. Simple physical activities are common among developing species. Nothing to be embarrassed about." Keiko made a strange choking sound. "Right. Nothing to be embarrassed about. That's one way to put it." As presentation day approached, Veltara felt confident in what to expect. She had taught this class for 2 centuries. She had seen the recreational activities of 47 different species. She understood the patterns. Peaceful species engaged in quiet activities. Warrior species had martial demonstrations. Intellectual species played strategic games. Humans were clearly a young, peaceful species still finding their place in the galaxy. Their recreation would reflect that simplicity. She had absolutely no idea how wrong she was. The presentation day arrived with clear skies visible through the Academy's massive viewing windows. Students filed into the classroom, carrying their data crystals and projection devices. Veltara noticed an unusual energy in the room. The non-human students who had already made contact with humans seemed to be positioning themselves with clear views of both the presentation screen and Professor Veltara herself. This struck her as strange, but she attributed it to youthful curiosity. "Let us begin," Veltara announced, settling into her teaching platform. "We will proceed in alphabetical order, by species designation." The Kotheen went first. Brel activated his presentation, and the screen filled with images of his people engaged in complex puzzle solving. The massive, stone-like beings sat in perfect silence, their enormous hands manipulating intricate geometric shapes. The goal, Brel explained, was to achieve a meditative state through focused problem-solving. Some puzzles took years to complete. "Fascinating," Veltara commented. "The patience required demonstrates remarkable mental discipline." The Morphians presented next. Their recreation involved slowly shifting their physical forms into artistic shapes, creating living sculptures that could take months to perfect. Other Morphians would observe and appreciate these transformations in respectful quiet. "Beautiful," Veltara noted. "A perfect expression of your species' natural abilities." The Vrelians showed their harmony singing, thousands of voices blending together in perfect synchronization, creating sounds so pure that they could induce peaceful sleep in most species. The preparation for such performances took weeks of practice. Each presentation followed the pattern Veltara expected. Calm activities, peaceful pursuits, civilized recreation that reflected millions of years of evolution toward tranquility and order. Then Marcus Chen stood up. "Professor, fellow students, we're excited to share how humans have fun." He loaded the data crystal into the projector. "We tried to show a good variety since human recreation is pretty diverse. We hope you enjoy it." WWst, NWWs. Keiko, sitting in the front row, added quietly, "We also hope nobody gets too alarmed." Veltara's eye stalks tilted slightly. "Alarmed?" What an odd thing to say about recreational activities. The presentation began innocently enough. The screen showed human children running and playing in green parks. Families sat together sharing meals outdoors on checkered blankets. Young humans kicked a round ball back and forth, laughing as they chased it. "How charming," Veltara said, relief in her voice. "Simple physical games and social bonding. Very appropriate for a young species." Marcus smiled. "Oh, That's just the warm-up, Professor. The scene changed. Suddenly, a human stood at the open door of an aircraft high above the ground. Veltara leaned forward, concerned. Was this a malfunction? A disaster recording? But then, to her absolute horror, the human jumped out voluntarily. The camera followed as the human fell through the sky. Arms spread wide. Face showing not terror but pure joy. Veltara's skin immediately flushed a pale purple, the Zinthari sign of confusion and distress. Is that an emergency evacuation? She asked weakly. Nope. Marcus replied cheerfully. That's skydiving. It's super popular. People pay money to do it. They pay? Veltara's voice rose slightly. To throw themselves from functioning aircraft? Wait until you see base jumping. Keiko muttered to the student next to her. That's even better. The presentation continued. Now humans were strapping long boards to their feet and sliding down mountains covered in frozen water at incredible speeds. They wore minimal protection. They moved between trees and over jumps, sometimes launching themselves into the air before landing and continuing downward. This is snowboarding, Marcus explained. And skiing. Winter sports are really big on Earth. Oh, and that's ice climbing, where people scale frozen waterfalls using just picks and ropes. Veltara watched a human hanging from the side of a wall of ice, hundreds of meters above the ground. One slip would mean certain death. But the human's face showed concentration and something else, something that looked almost like happiness. Surely these activities are for military training. Veltara grasped for any logical explanation. Survival skills for emergency situations? A human student named James spoke up from the back row. Actually, Professor, most of us do these just on weekends. You know, to relax after a stressful week at work. Relax? Veltara repeated the word, as if she had never heard it before. The video shifted again. Now humans were riding massive waves of water on small boards. The waves towered over them, curling and crashing with enough force to break bones. The humans balanced on their boards, carving through the water, sometimes disappearing entirely inside the curved wall of the wave before emerging on the other side. That's surfing, Marcus said. Humans have been doing that for thousands of years. It's one of our oldest sports. Your ancestors invented risking death in crushing water for enjoyment? Veltara's 3 eye stalks were now fully extended in shock, a reaction she hadn't experienced in decades. While they were still developing basic tools? Veltara's Inselfen. Well, when you put it that way, it does sound a bit wild, Marcus admitted. But it's really fun. The adrenaline rush is amazing. Adrenaline? Veltara pulled up her datapad with trembling appendages, quickly searching the term. Her skin turned a deeper purple as she read. This is a stress hormone. A chemical your body releases when you are in danger. And you seek this feeling out voluntarily? Oh yeah, James confirmed. Some people are total adrenaline junkies. They're always looking for the next thrill. The presentation was only halfway through, and Veltara could feel her carefully constructed understanding of civilized behavior crumbling. On screen, humans were now climbing vertical rock faces using only their hands and feet. No propulsion packs, no gravity assistance. Just muscle, determination, and small cracks in the stone. A Vrelian student raised her hand, her voice concerned. Professor, are you well? Your color indicates significant stress. Veltara barely heard her. She was transfixed by the screen, where a human had just jumped from one rock ledge to another, hundreds of meters above the ground, with nothing but a small bag of white powder attached to their belt. What is in that bag? She whispered. Chalk, Marcus answered. Keeps the hands dry for better grip. That is all? Powder? No safety equipment? Free climbing is kind of about the purity of the challenge, Marcus explained. Though most people use ropes, free soloing without any protection is pretty extreme, even for us. Veltara's mind struggled to process the word extreme in this context. If climbing a sheer cliff face without safety equipment was extreme even by human standards, what exactly did they consider normal? She was about to find out, and she was not prepared for the answer. The classroom had fallen into an unusual silence. Every student watched the presentation, but half of them were also watching Professor Veltara. Her normally calm gray skin had turned a vibrant purple that was slowly trending toward blue, a color most Zinthari only displayed during life-threatening emergencies. The video continued, merciless in its documentation of human recreational activities. Now the screen showed humans deliberately entering metal cages that were then lowered into water. Through the bars, massive predatory creatures circled. They had rows of sharp teeth and cold, calculating eyes. The creatures were easily 3 times the size of the humans. Yet the humans simply floated there, watching these predators with what appeared to be fascination. Shark cage diving, Marcus narrated, his tone suggesting this was the most normal thing in the galaxy. Great white sharks are apex predators from Earth's oceans. People travel from all over the world to see them up close. Veltara's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. Your planet has predators that can consume you, and you pay to get closer to them. Well, the cage keeps you safe, Keiko offered helpfully. The cage? Veltara's eye stalks swiveled to focus on the human student. The only thing between you and being eaten is a metal cage? What if it malfunctions? Marcus and Keiko exchanged glances. Well, Marcus said slowly, there are also people who dive with sharks without cages. They're usually smaller sharks, though. Usually smaller, Veltara repeated, her voice hollow. A Kotheen student made a rumbling sound that was his species' version of laughter. I tried to warn you, Professor, Brel said, his rocky features showing amusement. I visited Earth last year. The humans asked if I wanted to try something called bungee jumping. I researched what it meant. I immediately returned to my shuttle. What is bungee jumping? Veltara asked, though part of her desperately did not want to know. The video answered her question. A human stood on a bridge high above a river gorge. They had an elastic cord attached to their ankles. Then, while others cheered and encouraged them, they jumped off the bridge head first. The cord stretched as they fell, stopping them just meters above the water, then bounced them up and down repeatedly. They tie themselves with rope and throw themselves off structures, Veltara stated, her voice completely flat. They do this for enjoyment. The physics are really interesting, actually, James called out. The elasticity of the cord converts the kinetic energy of the fall into, I do not need a physics lesson. Veltara's voice cracked. I need to understand why your species has survived this long. The presentation moved to what Marcus called extreme sports racing. Humans sat in small vehicles with wheels and no protective shell. They raced these vehicles around tracks at speeds that would be fatal in a collision. The camera showed several crashes. Metal twisted, wheels flew off. The vehicles sometimes flipped multiple times. Motor racing has been popular for over a century, Marcus explained. Formula racing, rally racing, motorcycle racing. People love the speed and the competition. Veltara watched a human climb out of a crashed vehicle, give a wave to the crowd, and walk away as if nothing significant had happened. They survive these crashes? Usually, Marcus said. We've gotten pretty good at safety equipment, racing suits, helmets, roll cages in the vehicles. The survival rate is actually pretty high now. Pretty high, Veltara echoed weakly. You measure success in survival rates. The video shifted to urban environments. Humans were running across rooftops, jumping between buildings, vaulting over walls, and flipping through the air. They moved through the city as if the ground were optional, treating every obstacle as an opportunity to perform acrobatics. Parkour and free running, Keiko announced proudly. It's about moving through your environment as efficiently and creatively as possible. It started in France but spread worldwide. You throw yourselves off buildings in your cities, Veltara said. While going about your daily lives, you just decide to jump off buildings. Well, we calculate the distances first, Marcus added. It's not random. There's a lot of skill involved. The next segment showed what Marcus called contact sports. Veltara watched in growing horror as humans deliberately collided with each other at full speed. In one sport called rugby, they formed massive groups, pushing and shoving against each other while trying to carry an oval ball. In another called boxing, two humans stood in a ring and struck each other repeatedly until one could no longer continue. "You fight each other?" Veltara asked. "For recreation?" "Controlled fighting," James clarified. "With rules and referees. It's a test of skill, strength, and strategy. Very different from actual violence." A Morphean student spoke up, their voice gentle. "Professor, perhaps we should take a break? You are showing signs of significant distress." "No," Veltara said firmly, though her skin color suggested she very much needed a break. "I must understand this." "Continue, Marcus." Marcus hesitated, exchanging worried glances with the other humans. "Professor, maybe we should skip ahead. The next section is about extreme mountain climbing and deep-sea diving. And after that we have the segment on combat sports and—" "Show me everything," Veltara interrupted. "I am a scientist. I must see the complete picture of human recreation." The video continued. Humans climbed mountains so tall that the air became too thin to breathe properly, requiring them to carry oxygen supplies. They descended into caves deep underground, squeezing through gaps barely wide enough for their bodies. They dove to depths in the ocean where the pressure could crush their bodies. Protected only by specialized suits and equipment. Mount Everest. Marcus narrated, as the video showed humans struggling through blizzard conditions on a mountain peak. The highest point on Earth. Hundreds of people climb it every year. "Why?" Veltara asked, genuinely confused. "What is at the top?" "Nothing, really," Marcus admitted. "Just the accomplishment of reaching it. The challenge itself is the reward." "The challenge is the reward," Veltara repeated slowly. She looked at the datapad in her hands, then at the humans in her classroom, then back at the screen. A terrible understanding was beginning to dawn on her. On screen, a human was now jumping from a cliff wearing a suit with fabric wings, gliding through the air between narrow rock formations at tremendous speeds. "That's wingsuit flying," Keiko said quietly. "It's considered one of the most dangerous sports we've invented." "One of?" Veltara's voice was barely audible now. Marcus cleared his throat. "Professor, we haven't shown the really extreme stuff yet. We thought we'd ease into it with the common recreational activities first." "Oh." Every eye stalk on Veltara's head turned to focus on Marcus with laser intensity. "This is you easing into it?" The classroom atmosphere had changed completely. What began as a simple academic presentation had transformed into something else entirely. Several students had moved to the edges of their seats. Others had pulled out their own datapads to record Professor Veltara's reactions. The Vrelian student in the front row had actually summoned the Academy's medical assistant to stand by, just in case. Veltara herself sat rigidly on her teaching platform, all three eye stalks fixed on the presentation screen. Her skin had progressed through purple and blue and was now approaching a shade of deep indigo that Zinthari physiology texts described as extreme psychological distress. Small scales had begun falling from her shoulders, a stress response her species only displayed in truly overwhelming situations. "Perhaps we should stop here," suggested Professor Thress, the Colvin department head who had quietly entered the back of the classroom. His long experience at the academy had taught him to recognize when a situation was spiraling beyond normal parameters. "No," Veltara said, her voice tight with determination. "I am a xenopsychology expert with 200 years of experience. I will not be defeated by a simple presentation about recreational activities." Marcus looked genuinely concerned now. "Professor, we really can stop. We've shown enough to give everyone the basic idea." "Show me the rest," Veltara insisted. "You said this was the common activities. Show me what you consider extreme." The humans in the room exchanged worried glances. Finally, Keiko nodded at Marcus, who reluctantly advanced the presentation. The screen now showed a human standing at the edge of a cliff, much like the earlier footage. But this time, there was no wingsuit, no parachute visible. The human simply jumped, falling straight down toward the ground far below. At what seemed like the last possible moment, a parachute deployed. "Base jumping," Marcus explained quietly. Building, antenna, span, earth. People jump from fixed objects instead of aircraft. It's more dangerous than regular skydiving because you have less time to deploy the parachute. Less time, Veltara muttered. So you invented a more dangerous version of the already dangerous activity of throwing yourselves from high places. Well, yes, Marcus admitted. Humans tend to do that a lot. Once something becomes routine, we look for ways to make it more challenging. The video showed more examples. Humans diving into water from platforms over 25 meters high. Humans riding bicycles down nearly vertical mountain slopes, jumping over rocks and logs. Humans in small boats deliberately riding through massive river rapids that could easily flip and crush their tiny vessels. Whitewater rafting, James offered. The rivers are graded by difficulty levels. Class 5 rapids are considered extremely dangerous. They're very popular. IP, of course they are, Veltara said weakly. Then came the segment that would later become famous throughout the academy. The video showed a human swimming in open water, surrounded by smaller sharks. But these humans had no cages, no protective equipment beyond basic diving gear. They simply swam among the predators as if it were the most natural thing in the galaxy. Free diving with sharks, Marcus explained. Some species of sharks are actually pretty calm if you approach them correctly. Bull sharks and tiger sharks are more dangerous, but even those can be. Stop, Veltara interrupted. Please tell me that is the most dangerous thing humans do in water. The uncomfortable silence that followed told her everything she needed to know. Keiko spoke up hesitantly. There are people who free dive to extreme depths without breathing equipment. They hold their breath and dive over 100 meters down. The pressure at those depths can cause serious damage, but divers train for years to do it safely. Mostly safely. Mostly, Veltara repeated, the word sounding like a curse. The presentation moved to what Marcus called adventure tourism. The screen showed various locations on Earth where humans specifically traveled to engage in dangerous activities. There were volcanoes where people hiked to the very edge of boiling lava flows. There were caves with narrow passages where people squeezed through gaps in complete darkness. There were deserts where people ran marathons in heat that could cause organ failure. Desert running, Marcus said. Some races are over 200 kilometers long. Runners carry all their own supplies and navigate through extreme heat. Why? Veltara asked. And this time, the question carried genuine desperation. Why do they do this? What evolutionary purpose does it serve? What survival advantage does any of this provide? Marcus paused the presentation and turned to face the professor directly. His expression became more serious, more thoughtful than it had been throughout the entire presentation. Professor, he said carefully, I think that's kind of the point. Humans don't do these things for survival. We do them because we're not in survival mode anymore. For most of human history, every day was a struggle just to stay alive. We had predators hunting us. We had to find food and water. We had to survive harsh weather without technology. Keiko picked up the explanation. Our brains evolved to handle constant danger. We developed fight or flight responses, adrenaline systems, and dopamine rewards for taking calculated risks. But then we built civilizations. We created safety. We removed most of the natural dangers from our daily lives. And your brains still crave the chemicals they evolved to produce during dangerous situations, Veltara said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn despite her distress. Exactly, James confirmed. So we recreate danger in controlled ways. We get the thrill, the challenge, the chemical rush, but with safety measures and training to minimize actual harm. It's like our brains are engines built for survival. But we live in a world where survival is easy, so we need to give those engines something to do. Veltara was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. The classroom waited in tense silence. Finally, she spoke. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. The activities you have shown today, they represent what percentage of human recreational options? Marcus winced. Maybe 20%? There's also competitive eating, bull running, tornado chasing, storm surfing, crocodile wrestling, Something Australians do with kangaroos. Australians, Veltara interrupted. I have seen that word several times in the research materials. Who are Australians? Every human in the room suddenly looked very uncomfortable. They're people from a specific continent on Earth, Keiko said carefully. A place called Australia. And what makes them notable? Well, Marcus said slowly, Australia kind of has the most dangerous wildlife on Earth concentrated in one place. And the people there, sort of, embrace that. Veltara pulled up her datapad with shaking appendages and searched for information about Australia. Her skin went from indigo to almost black as she read. Your planet has an entire continent where nearly everything can end you, and people choose to live there. And they have tourism? Australian tourism is pretty popular, actually, James offered weakly. Professor Veltara stood up abruptly, her movements sharp and uncoordinated. I need to file a report with the Galactic Health Council. This is clearly a species-wide psychological condition that requires immediate intervention and study. Professor Thress stepped forward. Veltara, perhaps you should take some time to... Time? Veltara's voice cracked. Director Thress, these beings throw themselves off cliffs for entertainment. They wrestle predators. They climb mountains where they cannot breathe. And they call it relaxation. She looked around the classroom at all the students staring at her. The humans appeared genuinely worried now. The other species watched with various expressions of concern and, in some cases, barely suppressed amusement. Class is dismissed, Veltara announced. I need to reassess my entire understanding of psychology and civilization. She walked out of the classroom on unsteady legs, leaving behind a room full of students, and one very interesting presentation that would soon spread throughout the entire Galactic Academy. For 3 days, Professor Veltara did not leave her quarters. The door remained locked, the windows darkened. Concerned colleagues stopped by, but she refused all visitors. Inside, her living space had transformed into something resembling a research bunker during a crisis. Data pads covered every surface. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing human history, psychology reports, survival statistics, and medical studies. The walls were lined with notes written in Veltara's own script, arrows connecting different pieces of information in patterns that grew increasingly chaotic. She had spent 72 hours doing nothing but researching humanity, and every new piece of information made the situation worse. On the 4th day, Director Thress arrived at her door. He did not knock. He simply used his administrative override code and entered. Veltara, he said gently. The students are worried. The faculty is concerned. You missed 2 classes. Veltara sat in the center of the room, surrounded by floating displays. Her skin had returned to its normal gray color, but her eye stalks drooped with exhaustion. She looked up at Thress with an expression of utter defeat. Did you know, she said without greeting, that humans invented extreme sports during their most peaceful periods, when their survival was most secure, when they had eliminated most threats from their environment? They created new dangers. Deliberately. Thress settled carefully into a chair, moving aside several data pads. I did know that, yes. They have a phrase, Veltara continued, pulling up one of her displays. Hold my beer. Do you know what it means? I have heard it many times, Thress admitted. It means someone is about to do something catastrophically stupid and dangerous, and they want their hands free to do it. Veltara's voice carried a mix of horror and fascination. They say it before jumping over things, climbing things, racing things, fighting things. It has become a warning phrase throughout the galaxy. When a human says, hold my beer, intelligent beings evacuate the area. She pulled up another display, this one showing human technological advancement. Look at this timeline, Director. Humans achieved spaceflight in just 60 years after their first powered aircraft. 60 years. It took the Zinthari 3,000 years to accomplish the same progression. Do you know why humans advanced so quickly? Why? Thress asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Because they were bored. Veltara stood abruptly, gesturing at the displays. They got bored with flying in atmosphere, so they said let us fly to space. They got bored with their own moon, so they sent probes to other planets. They got bored with probes, so they built ships. Everything humans do is driven by this need for new challenges, new thrills, new dangers to overcome. She pulled up footage from the human presentation, now paused on an image of a human climbing a frozen waterfall. I have been teaching xenopsychology for 2 centuries. I have studied 47 different species. I thought I understood the patterns of civilized development. But humans, her voice trailed off. She pulled up a new file, this one showing human response to the Krithian pirate attack on the Deneb colony 6 months earlier. The security footage showed a human officer named Sarah Chen facing down 3 armed pirates. Watch this, Veltara said quietly. In the footage, Sarah Chen stood alone in a corridor as the pirates advanced. She was outnumbered and outgunned. Any rational being would have retreated or surrendered. Instead, Sarah smiled. The audio picked up her words clearly. Finally, she had said. Some excitement. Then she had proceeded to defeat all 3 pirates using nothing but hand-to-hand combat and environmental advantages. The fight lasted 47 seconds. She smiled, Veltara said. She was happy about the danger. That is not an abnormal response for a human. That is typical. Thress watched the professor carefully. What are you saying, Veltara? She turned to face him directly. I am saying I cannot teach this course anymore. How can I lecture about psychological wellness to a species that considers throwing themselves off cliffs to be therapeutic? How can I discuss healthy recreation with beings who define relaxation as activities that would give my species stress-induced organ failure? She picked up a data pad from her desk and handed it to Thress. This is my formal resignation from teaching comparative species psychology. I recommend the Academy assign a human professor to teach the course, someone who understands that boredom is not actually worse than death. Thress took the pad, but did not activate it. Instead, he set it aside and looked at Veltara with the calm wisdom of his 4 centuries. Tell me, he said. When the Vrelian transport crashed on Theta 7 last year, who led the rescue operation in those dangerous mountain conditions? Veltara blinked. The Human Emergency Response Team. And when the Morphean Research Station was trapped under ice on Europa, who volunteered to dive beneath the frozen surface to save them? Human deep-sea specialists, Veltara admitted quietly. And when we needed someone to test the new shuttle design that had a 30% chance of catastrophic failure on the first flight, who stood in line volunteering? Veltara was silent for a moment. 17 humans. We had to turn most of them away. Thress leaned forward. Veltara, this fear you are feeling, do you know what the humans would call it? Sanity? Respect. Thress corrected gently. You have finally understood what makes humanity so valuable to the Galactic Council. Every other species in known space evolved to avoid danger. We developed bigger brains to predict threats. We built better tools to protect ourselves. We created civilizations to shield us from the harsh universe. He gestured to the displays showing human recreational activities. Humans evolved differently. They did not just survive danger. They mastered it. They conquered it. And then, when there was not enough danger left, they invented more. That madness, you see, that seemingly self-destructive behavior, it is actually their greatest strength. Veltara sank back into her chair. You are saying this insanity is not a flaw. It is their advantage. Exactly. When the Galactic Council faces a crisis that seems impossible, when we need someone to do something that appears suicidal, when we require volunteers for missions where survival is not guaranteed, who do we call? Humans, Veltara whispered. And they come running, Thress said. Eager, excited, smiling, because where we see danger, they see opportunity. Where we see risk, they see challenge. Where we see certain death, they see the chance to do something nobody has done before. He stood and walked to the window, opening the darkening screens to let in the light from the Academy's twin suns. You told me you could not teach them about psychological wellness, but perhaps that is not what they need from you. Perhaps what they need is for you to help the rest of the galaxy understand them. to explain to other species why humans do what they do. Veltara considered this for a long moment. She looked at the data surrounding her, all the research she had compiled. Slowly, understanding replaced confusion. They are not broken, she said softly. They are just optimized for a different kind of survival. Not the survival of avoiding death, but the survival of constantly pushing boundaries. Now you understand, Thress said. Veltara stood slowly. She picked up the resignation pad and deactivated it. I will need to completely restructure my curriculum. Add psychological preparation sessions for non-human students. Create safety protocols for when discussing human recreation. Perhaps warning labels. Whatever you think is necessary, Thress agreed. And I will need Marcus Chen and the other human students to serve as teaching assistants. They can provide context that I cannot. I am sure they would be honored. Veltara began organizing her datapads, her movements regaining their usual efficiency. Director, I have one more question. When you first encountered humans, how did you react to learning about their recreational activities? Thress smiled, a rare expression for his normally stoic species. I watched a video of something called the running of the bulls in a place named Pamplona. Humans deliberately run in front of charging herd animals that could trample them. For fun. And I immediately requested that 3 human security officers be assigned to the academy. I realized that any species crazy enough to do that for entertainment would be invaluable in a real crisis. He walked to the door, then paused. The human presentation has spread throughout the academy network. It is now required viewing for all xenopsychology students across the galaxy, with appropriate trigger warnings, of course. After he left, Veltara stood alone in her quarters, looking at the frozen image of a human climbing that ice wall. She zoomed in on the human's face. Despite the danger, despite the cold, despite the very real possibility of death, the human was smiling. For the first time in 3 days, Veltara felt her own version of a smile forming. She understood now. Humans were not insane. They were just the galaxy's answer to a question no other species had thought to ask. What if survival is not enough? What if merely existing is not the goal? What if life is meant to be lived at full intensity, with every capability pushed to its limit? The next semester, her course syllabus included a new section titled Human Recreation and Risk Assessment. The first line of that section read, "The following content may be disturbing to species who value safety and longevity. Proceed with caution." The second line read, "Understanding why humans seek danger is essential to understanding why they are such valuable allies." And somewhere in the academy halls, Marcus Chen saw the updated syllabus and smiled. Then he sent a message to his friends back on Earth, "Professor finally gets it." The response came back immediately. "Hold my beer."